Hello again, everybody. I'm Roger Hoover. Glad to welcome you back to the Crimson Tide Sports Network, and welcome to this Thursday edition of Crimson Drive, driven by Tuscaloosa Toyota. Make sure you check them out online at tuscaloosatoyota.com. We're glad you're with us as we continue rolling along in the month of June, a bit of our offseason for Alabama athletics, but certainly still a lot to get to on the show today. Go through all of our headlines presented by RJ Young. They're the official technology solutions provider of Crimson Drive. And first of all, coming up on the show, we get to visit with our friend Paul Finebaum of the SEC Network and ESPN Radio as we have a wide-ranging conversation on the college football landscape at this time of the year, and also some storylines he's keeping in mind as we get closer to SEC Media Days and then fall camp starting in August. Then we'll be talking with Garrett McMillan from the Alabama baseball team. You saw him be the Friday night ace pitcher of the Crimson Tide all throughout the season for Alabama this spring. This summer, he's not pitching. He's swinging a bat. You'll learn more about that coming up with Garrett in just a few moments. Go through some other headlines for today. Alabama basketball. We'll be focusing on basketball a lot coming up next week because tonight is the NBA draft. So we'll see if there are some hopefuls for the Crimson Tide to get drafted in the draft, as we've certainly seen some great success recently for Alabama in the NBA draft. Hopefully that will continue coming up tonight. It was announced as well that the CM Newton Classic will be played against Gonzaga coming up in Birmingham. That'll be on Saturday, December 17th at Legacy Arena. Of course, last year was a great day for the Crimson Tide, beating Gonzaga in the battle in Seattle the same day as Alabama won the SEC championship in football against Georgia. But now we get to see once again Alabama and Gonzaga, and once again it will not be on campus, as we did not go to Spokane for the Gonzaga game last year, went to Seattle, and instead of coming to Tuscaloosa, the game against Gonzaga will be played downtown in Birmingham. And a few other notes on Alabama athletics for today. I want to say congratulations to Mick Potter, who we've had recently on the show. He was named to the Furman Hall of Fame. Furman University in Greenville, South Carolina. He was the golf coach there before coming to Alabama, so congratulations to him on that honor after, once again, a great season for Alabama women's golf. And then academically, everybody doing well, really historically well. The academic performance rate, record marks set by men's basketball, soccer, football, women's basketball, all terrific work done by Alabama student athletes in the classroom. Tip of the cap, especially to men's basketball and soccer, right at 1,000. Certainly love to see that. So that's what's going on around Crimson Tide athletics. And again, this is the time of the year we talk a lot of football. It's talking season, as Steve Spurrier once put it many years ago, as we're always kind of looking at what's ahead, taking a little bit of a look back, but mostly looking ahead. So no one better to talk to than Paul Finebaum of ESPN and the SEC Network to get his thoughts at this time of the year.
First of all, Paul, speaking of the show, I know it's kind of best of season. Have you gotten a whole new list of restaurants and places to check out after a poll you put out earlier in the week? Good to see you.
Yeah, you can. Thank you, Roger. You can tell it's June when we just throw stuff out on Twitter, and it dominates what the main topics of the day were supposed to be. But I've always learned in the talk show business, just let the audience go wherever they want. They are the customers. So I don't think there's, unless you're an SEC baseball team right now, anything that would be that important that would stop somebody from sharing their favorite barbecue restaurant.
Have you been to most great barbecue places and most great restaurants in the SEC, or do you try to change it up throughout all your travels during football season?
Well, don't quote me on this, but I don't eat barbecue, so I immediately am disqualified as an SEC fan. But my wife does, so I sit at barbecue restaurants, seeing what kind of chicken they have quite often. But yeah, I mean, in the past, I guess I've been to most of the places, but you know this because you travel around the SEC. The night before a game, which is the only time I'm in a college town, is probably not the best time to go out and really enjoy yourself. It's lunacy. I'd much rather go to a hot spot in Tuscaloosa on a quiet June day than the night before the Auburn game.
It's a really good strategy. Again, that's some of the conversation you've been having on your show over the last few weeks. But last Friday, you also had a member of the Crimson Tide on the show in Will Anderson Jr. Just what did you enjoy about getting to visit with him for the first time?
I was blown away. I've been around him in big settings, but just the personality, his charisma, his complete and total command of everything was really was striking to me, and his honesty. A lot of players will, when you bring up the Heisman, he would say, "Well, it doesn't matter to me. I'm a team player." He said, "Yeah, that's on my bucket list for the next season." I thought it was great. I mean, forgetting the fact that he's arguably the most talented player in the country, he's also one of the most personable, and I think that really speaks well.
Does it bring back memories for you covering Alabama football in the 80s with how dominant Cornelius Bennett was, and then right after that, Derrick Thomas with what he was able to do? And I bet you didn't think you'd see many players that would remind you of those guys.
No, I mean, you would think there's never been a combination like that, and that's an age-old debate, who's better between those two. I've run into I think it's Steve Berline a couple of times over the years, the quarterback from Notre Dame that Cornelius Bennett literally split in half at Legion Field one Saturday, and he does not like that subject being brought up. And I got to know Derrick very well afterwards, and the two of them together were simply unbelievable. And I know later on in '92 you had the bookends at defensive end, but from a linebacker standpoint, he's in rarefied air.
And then looking at Will Anderson Jr. as well as Bryce Young, who I know you've spoken with before, are they two of the best examples possible of the process that Nick Saban tries to instill in his players?
Yeah, I joked with Bryce Young a couple of months ago. I mean, I said my goal is to get you to get out of the process, and I've got a reputation as an interviewer, but I failed miserably against a young kid, so to speak. They do not deviate, and I have yet to run into a Saban player who does. They understand what it's all about, and they do not go off script. And as a newspaper reporter back in the day, Roger, if I could tell secrets on myself, I mean, my goal was to go into the locker room and disrupt. I mean, I was like a defensive end as well, and I mean, I would wait as soon as everybody. And back then, you could do it. I mean, today it's very guarded. You don't just wander by yourself in a locker room. But I would wait until everybody else had gone, and then you would get somebody and let it roll. And often you would come away with an amazing story. Today, no chance.
And then looking at the Crimson Tide as we get ready for fall practice and the season that's coming up, what's going to be on your mind when you watch the progress of this team?
Well, in talking to the experts, and that's one thing we do, we never run short. Everyone keeps pointing toward the offensive line as the weak link. But if that's the weak link at Alabama, what we have here is another national championship team. And I think we do. I think you're just manufacturing things right now to say about Alabama if you're looking for a hole, because I don't think you can really find one. We had a guy on, I think it was Tuesday night of this week, who, broadly speaking, in complimenting Kirby Smart over Nick Saban, talked about how Saban's defenses have not been the same. Instead, if you look at Georgia, that's where the old Saban defenses are. I would beg to disagree. I bet Nick Saban and Pete Golding would too. It's just the fact that offenses now are better than they've ever been. And as good as your defense is, you are going to be seriously challenged. Last year's Georgia defense, it was as good as I've seen. And Alabama still gashed them in the SEC championship game. So these things can happen.
Nick Saban was in the news, of course, a few weeks ago for his comments on name, image, and likeness. We heard the comments as well from Jimbo Fisher after that. Even after those two went to Destin, we heard some discussion there. We heard from Greg Sankey. Where is this NIL discussion going from here?
Well, I think it's wrong and premature to say this is over. It's not. I can assure you, Roger, nothing has changed. Jimbo Fisher still feels the same way about Saban that he enunciated in late May. And I think Saban still feels the same way about the situation in general. That was as raw and as guttural as you are going to publicly get from Nick Saban. Now, those who know him well, and I know you do, and I'm not asking you, but I'm telling the audience, most of us who know Saban a little bit better than others have heard Saban talk like that, but not publicly. And that's what was so interesting. And what I think about in retrospect, if it had ended there, if Nick Saban had said what he had said, and Jimbo Fisher had walked in the next morning and say, "I'm disappointed. I've worked for Coach Saban all these years and have truly admired him, and I just can't believe that he insulted all the young men on my team. But I'm moving on because whatever." He would have won. But instead he went scorched earth. He decided to just blow up everything that he's ever said about Nick Saban in the past. And I think it backfired. And Saban has had nothing more to say about it other than I was wrong. I shouldn't have said it. I'm not talking about it anymore. And Jimbo, I'll quote Jim Donnan on our show the other night. He came into Destin saying, "I'm moving on." He said that so many times you thought he was trying to rhyme a country song. I mean, it was an absurd press conference. I mean, show some dignity. Either walk in there and say, "Listen, for the good of all of us, I'm going to move on." But instead, he sounded like a little kid whose mother and father were off behind the stage, warning him, "Don't dare go off script." And I think it's a very ugly incident, and I think it's going to resurface at some point. I can't tell you when, but it's not over. I'll leave you with that.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is it going to be the same song, different verse coming up at SEC Media Days and then all the build up for the game on October 8th in Tuscaloosa?
No, I don't think you're going to get any more at media days, but I think what you're going to get, I'm compromising myself here by answering this question. I think what you're going to get is a lot more on this subject in some form or fashion. I can almost guarantee you that.
Is there anyone happier about this situation, that discussion, than Brian Harsin? Because in some other college football cycles and the news cycles in the offseason, what happened with him at Auburn would have dominated the discussion leading up to media days. But he has kind of gone under the radar. He's been supporting Auburn baseball in the World Series, supported Auburn basketball's run. Just what do you make of the Harsin situation at Auburn right now?
Roger, I don't like to do this because I think we both do the same business. But what was that name again you mentioned?
Brian Harsin.
Oh, okay. I hadn't heard it in so long. I was just wanting to make sure I heard it correctly. Brian Harsin is in a really terrible spot because from all the things the audience already knows, and he's going to need a huge season. He can support the baseball team, the basketball team, the gymnastics team, but the team that needs his support is the football team. And I don't really know what the future looks like for him other than bleak. I don't have to measure my words at this point in my life. When you try to fire your head coach, and they tried to fire him, I'm talking about the alumni, and you only get saved because the case you make against him doesn't hold up, and he is able to gain some sympathy in the process. You've got a terrible situation. And I think what's really even more dramatic is that I grew up as a writer and as a talk show host in the state when that was an every single day rivalry. Roger, you know that, even though you're much younger. It's not anymore. And I'm not being dismissive of Auburn. It's a very good school. It's got a lot of really outstanding athletic endeavors, but Alabama has moved so far away, and Auburn has just self-destructed over the years with its constant meddling and meddling by the top people, not by just some idle fan. So if he gets off to a rough start, he'll be gone. If he wins big early on, the Penn State game is probably the most important. He's got a chance to hold on, but he is no longer a serious threat to Alabama from a recruiting standpoint or any other standpoint.
A couple of other quick hits around the SEC before we let you go, starting with Georgia, a team that did beat Alabama in the national championship this past year. What do you feel like Kirby Smart's going to learn this season about trying to stay on top of the mountaintop? He's been on the climb the last few years, but trying to stay there.
Yeah, ask people like Nick Saban and Mike Krzyzewski and the greats who have ever been in their position that this is the challenge. I'm not saying you can win a national championship because a lot of great coaches have never done that, but it is so difficult to maintain. I think he can. I will go right out and say I don't like his quarterback situation at all. I think easy for me to suggest what somebody should do with their life, but I thought Stetson Bennett would have been better off moving on. I think Georgia would have been better off. Now they have potential controversy there if he doesn't play up to potential. And that to me is the weak link, even though behind him you have 5-star after 5-star. The offense is really good. And Kirby told me a couple weeks ago in Destin that that's where they are concentrating on. They have to make that a more explosive offense than it's been in the past. Defensively, you could probably tell me the Alabama team that has lost as many stars as Georgia, but I'm not sure it's possible to come up with that very easily. Alabama has lost tremendous talent, but I don't think anyone has ever had to replace as many key players as Kirby Smart on defense.
Well, that'll be big talking points coming up for SEC Media Days this year, shifting back to Atlanta, the College Football Hall of Fame coming up in July. But I know earlier, before we had Media Days starting in, I believe, 1985, we had the SEC Skyriders Tour. Were you ever part of that? Could you explain what that was to our fans?
It's one of the few times I can ever say for the rest of my life that I was too young to be a part of that. I got in as it was ending. In fact, I was in Birmingham about a week and a half ago. There was a dinner honoring a bunch of old sports writers, and I mean old. I was like in the middle of the pack in terms of age, and so I got to Birmingham. It was still going on, but I was the lowest rung on the seniority. What it really was sports writers and sportscasters across the SEC. They would get on 2 or 3 planes and go and hit sometimes as many as 2 SEC towns a day, often just one. And it would be more of a social event. They would fly in and they'd take them out to Coach Bryant's house, and the liquor would flow and the stories would go, and then they'd get on the plane. And most of the time they would gather up their stuff and print it and broadcast it much later. So that way they could keep on the move. It's not like today. It's where Bo Jackson was discovered on the practice field. People had heard of him, but people weren't sure that he was going to be what he was. Same when, Herschel Walker, all of a sudden people said, can you believe this guy? He's exactly what we thought he would be. So it's a lost art. Media days, if you started in 1985 to where it is today, is much different. It was a little bit more informal, but it's a circus, and the SEC likes it that way. They want to brag how many credentials they've handed out, just so they can let everybody know how great they are. And by the way, they really don't have to do that. I've been to other media days. There's nothing quite like it.
Certainly is. And well, Paul, we look forward to seeing you and hopefully catching up with you coming up in a few weeks in July Media Days. But just thank you so much for joining us here in late June on the Crimson Tide Sports Network. All the best to you. Thank you.
Roger, my pleasure. Thank you.
Always good to catch up with Paul Finebaum, especially at this time of the year where we're just talking about a lot of big picture things in college football, not only with Alabama, but in the game itself. A really great insight from Paul Finebaum, host of the Paul Finebaum Show on ESPN Radio and the SEC Network. Switch gears now to Alabama baseball. This past spring on Friday nights at Sewell Thomas Stadium or all across the SEC, you got to see Garrett McMillan pitch for the Alabama Crimson Tide as he transferred from Shelton State to Tuscaloosa to Alabama, and he has really stepped into that Friday night role really well for Alabama. But you may be surprised this summer he is swinging the bat. He's not necessarily pitching. So for more on that, we check in with Alabama's Garrett McMillan.
Garrett, it's great to see you. Roll Tide. How's everything going in summer baseball for you?
Roll Tide. Everything's going good over here. I mean, get some at bats in, seeing the ball well, so it's going good.
Well, let's start right there. What are you up to this summer? Where are you, and how are you approaching this summer? Not necessarily pitching, but getting to use the bat once again.
I'm in Strasburg, Virginia, playing for the Strasburg Express, and I'm just approaching them, stretching real well, taking every at bat, just getting my swing back down and trying to get my time back down and hit the ball a little bit. So just trying to get some reps in, not too much, just some good reps in for the next coming up season.
Is it a wooden bat league, or are you getting to use a wooden bat for the first time in a while?
Yes, sir. It is a wooden bat league.
How have you liked that adjustment going from an aluminum bat to the wood?
I've always liked hitting wood bats. I mean, I've hit in the summer before, so I've always actually enjoyed it a little bit better than hitting with metal, so it's not too big of a change.
So for Crimson Tide fans, of course, they got to see you pitch for Alabama this past spring, but they didn't get to see you hit. Did you hope you could be a two-way player last spring, or how did it work out that you only pitched?
I mean, it just kind of worked out the way it did because I was named the Friday starter off the bat, so I just kind of ended up just pitching. I mean, I hit a little bit in the fall, but once they named me the Friday starter, we just kind of mutually agreed to just be a pitcher at that time.
Did you take any swings in the batting cages, BP, anything like that during the season?
For sure. Not during the spring season, but during the fall season, I was definitely swinging a little bit.
Well, you mentioned you became the Friday night starter for the Crimson Tide. You ended up leading the SEC in innings pitched with 86. How proud are you of that, first of all?
I mean, that's definitely something I pride myself on, is giving my team a chance to win and being the Friday guys, giving innings to help the rest of the weekend to help win those games as well with the bullpen. So it's definitely something I'm proud of.
And I'm sure as well, even if there were some first innings where you gave up some runs, you had to be proud that you were able to stay on the mound, keep Alabama in those games from the second inning and beyond.
For sure. That was definitely one of my, I mean, it kind of happened a decent amount, so I had to grind through it and work through and get some innings in for sure.
What was the biggest adjustment going from Shelton State to Alabama and facing SEC hitters for the first time?
I think it's just the quality of the hitters like throughout the whole lineup. I mean, at Shelton there was good hitters like 2, 3, 4, 5, but after that it would kind of fall off. But throughout the whole lineup with all pretty much all the SEC teams, every hitter's pretty good.
Did you enjoy kind of the mental chess match that you had to do against some of the really good SEC hitters when you'd face them a second or third time through the order?
For sure, and it's all about setting up your pitches and prior at bats and stuff like that to be able to get them out later in the game as well. So,
well, you mentioned your pitches. What did you throw, and what made you effective with your different pitches?
I had a pretty good spin rate fastball, which made my changeup play well, so it looked just like my fastball until the last second. So I just relied heavily on that changeup, and then with a few curveballs here and there, and try to locate my fastball.
What else do you think made the changeup so good? Because we saw you go to that a lot. It seemed like you got a lot of swings and misses for strike three.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the intent behind throwing well is that I look probably just like I do throwing my fastball when I throw it. So I think that has a lot to do with it. And it's such a big like speed gap. It's like 12 to 14 mile per hour difference. So I think that has a lot to do with it.
I haven't looked back on the stats on this, but I believe Dominic Tomez caught nearly every pitch that you threw throughout the season. Just how important was he in helping you have success?
Oh yeah, for sure. We had a relationship from the time we started in the fall. I mean, we could tell we were going to be good together, and I mean, we were on the same track out there. We were calling pitches together. I mean, it definitely was a big part in the success for sure.
Once again, Alabama played really good defense, whether it's the infield, whether it's the outfield. How much confidence does that give you as a pitcher, knowing the guys behind you are going to make some incredible plays like we saw?
Oh, for sure. It definitely helps because, I mean, it just makes you want to attack the strike zone and just let them work out there. I mean, they're out there, so you might as well use them for sure.
A lot of times Jim Jarvis would be kind of the last guy that would talk to you during a mound visit, stuff like that. Is he kind of the captain of the infield? Was he kind of always leading you guys?
For sure. Jim's definitely the captain of the team, and we look up to him a lot for sure.
Well, he certainly put together a solid year, and same for you as well. And now you're getting to play with the Strasburg Express. Just again, what do you hope to gain in terms of experience this summer, and then what do the next few weeks look like for you?
Definitely looking to gain experience. I mean, at the plate, these are pretty good arms here in this league, so seeing a couple SEC arms and just gaining reps off good arms like that will help me out a lot for next year. And that's pretty much why I came here, was just to get reps and just in case I were to hit next year and be a two-way guy.
Is that a hope you have for next season, that you would still be able to swing the bat as in addition to pitching for Alabama?
For sure. Only if I mean, I don't want to just be put in there just to be a two-way guy. I mean, I want to be put in there if I'm willing to help the team or if I can help the team.
Are you staying in touch with your teammates as they're starting to play some summer ball or get ready for the MLB draft?
Oh, for sure. I'm definitely talking to a couple of them.
And then I'm sure as well, you're watching the College World Series, and it's mostly SEC West teams that are still there. Just what is it like watching the NCAA postseason, seeing how strong the SEC has been?
Oh, it just gives us a lot of confidence for next year. Because I mean, 5 of the 8 teams in the College World Series we played and competed well with there. So I mean, we just know how close we are. We just got to get over the hump of those close games and then winning every game we should. I mean, we're definitely close, and you can tell just because of all the teams that are there right now and how we did against them this year.
Well, to wrap things up, I mentioned it on a broadcast earlier this season. Your grandfather showed us a picture of you and him at a baseball game, an Alabama baseball game when you were younger. What did it mean to you to get to wear that uniform this past season and get to play and live out a dream by being a part of the Crimson Tide?
Oh, for sure. It meant a lot to me. I mean, it was always my dream growing up to be out there pitching. I mean, to make it come true and be the Friday guy, it was definitely surreal and a dream come true for me.
Well, we were proud to watch you pitch for Alabama. Now we're happy you're hitting well for the Strasburg Express this summer and can't wait to see you back in Tuscaloosa. But Garrett, just thank you for joining us here on Crimson Drive. All the best to you. Roll Tide.
For sure. Roll Tide.
Best of luck to Garrett McMillan with the Strasburg Express playing in the Valley Baseball League this summer. Of course, a lot of Alabama players are around playing some summer baseball, and as we mentioned with Garrett, getting ready for the upcoming MLB draft coming up in July. But that's a quick update on Crimson Tide Baseball. We appreciate Garrett McMillan for his time. We thank Paul Finebaum of the SEC Network and ESPN as well for joining us earlier in the show, as we have one episode left of Crimson Drive driven by Tuscaloosa Toyota before we take a 2-week summer vacation
vacation coming up the first 2 weeks of July, and then we'll be back in mid-July with a report from SEC Media Days that are coming up in Atlanta. So we'll be back coming up next Thursday at 2 o'clock for Crimson Drive, driven by Tuscaloosa Toyota, right back here on the CTSN Facebook and YouTube pages. Big thanks to Ethan Carabin for producing this show, putting it all together. And again, thanks to Paul Finebaum and Garrett McMillan for joining us. For everybody with the Crimson Tide Sports Network, this is Roger Hoover saying roll tide and enjoy your weekend.